if you have made your expectations clear and communicated, what your expectations are out of a relationship and what you expect in a partnership, and you're very aware of what you're bringing to the table. And if you are not getting that back and the other person is not on your level, it's not a healthy relationship and you need to get out of it right away. Welcome back to Third Time's Me. This week's episode is going to be another solo episode. Yay. Well, I mean, not technically solo. I do have my lovely, adorable sweetie pie of a pup here, Riley. She is snoozing hardcore, though. It is, I think, 100 or 101 degrees today here in Portland, Oregon. It is effing hot, guys. But I am so excited for this week's episode. I am digging into a topic that I have been really reflecting on the last few weeks, and am going to be tying it back into some past episodes as well. This episode will technically be episode 19, but we're going to call it episode 18 because one of the episodes that I released last week or the week before was a teaser clip. If you're new to the show, welcome. If you are a returning listener, welcome again, and thank you for taking time out of your busy adult schedule and life to tune in and listen to my show. We've got a podcasting conference coming up the end of August, so I will be flying to Dallas, Texas for the Podcast Movement Conference. It's an annual podcasting conference that happens every year in a new city, and this year it's going to be in Dallas. Why they decided to host it in Dallas, Texas in one of the hottest months of the year, I have no fucking clue, but that's where it's going to be. So I will be flying out to Dallas for that at the end of August. And then in September, I've got a trip out to Phoenix to visit some of my bestest friends. I have not seen some of these guys in 4 or 5 years, just with everything that's happened with the pandemic. And so I'm really excited. I've got a couple friends in Phoenix that have recently had little babies, and I cannot wait to see the babies and give them all the kisses and love and just spend some really great quality time with my friends out there. Really stoked for that. And then later in September, I'll actually be flying out to Austin, which is my old stomping grounds, for a work retreat. Every year my company does an annual work retreat. We are a remote company, so there's no office. Everyone's just scattered all across the US, and it's one time a year that we all get together and just spend some time hanging out, enjoying each other's company, and getting to know each other outside of, professional versions of ourselves. It's crazy. I feel like I was really planning for this summer 2022, my first summer back in my home state of Oregon as an adult. So I moved away, left Oregon right before I started high school. So just moved back last fall, and this is my first summer back in Oregon in 15 years. And I was telling myself going into the summer season that I really wanted to focus on slowing down and just being here, just staying local, exploring more of the Pacific Northwest. And it's just kind of funny how, even with setting those intentions, somehow life just gets pretty crazy. But it's all been really, really fun things coming up that I have to look forward to. The summer, though, is already just flying by. I cannot believe that next week is going to be August. Holy crap. How did we get here already? The topic that recently came to me, and that was really speaking to me to focus on for this sit-down recording, is around the idea and problem that we have as a culture and society, I would say, with viewing relationships, the ending of relationships, as failures. And what I mean by that is, typically when you meet someone and they mention that they are maybe in the middle of a breakup or just went through a breakup, or of course the, forbidden and horrible D word, just went through a divorce or recently divorced, our initial reaction is to apologize. What I've realized the last couple years since having broke up with my last ex, who I was engaged to, the reaction that you're going to get from folks when you deliver that type of news about a relationship having ended is really so much about how you deliver that information, right? So when I was, within the first 6 months, if not more, fresh of that breakup from my ex-fiance, I was really in an emotionally distraught place. There was a lot going on in my life. There was a lot of drama. There was a lot of heartache. There was a lot of rebuilding of myself and a lot of logistics in my life that were very much like weighing on me emotionally, mentally, physically. So whether or not I intended to deliver that news or share that news in a conversation or share that update as I'm getting to know someone, whether or not I intended to, share it in a way of like, oh, feel bad for me, which not like I was asking for anyone to feel bad for me, but, naturally, just because of the state that I was in at the time, most people that are in tune with other people's energy could feel that energy coming from me of fresh heartache, right? But it's so interesting because in the last year, I have had so much growth, and it's been all a part of the journey the last 2 years and me going through this growth and healing from that relationship ending. The last year has been day and night different in how people respond to that. I don't get as much, oh, I'm so sorry energy, or, oh my gosh, that must have been so hard. I don't get that as much anymore. It's actually very rare. And I do feel very confident that that is because it's how I am expressing it and how I tell that story. People can feel my energy and can feel that I'm not like deep in the trenches of heartache, and I'm not depressed. And there's, none of that energy is coming from me. The way that I tell it is, yeah, I actually, I've been actually engaged twice before. Neither of them I got married to, but I've been engaged twice before. And, I'm, so glad that I went through those experiences, and like, it made me who I am today. That's a picture that you're painting to folks that maybe don't know you and don't know your history, is so different than the type of energy that you're going to give off out of a fresh breakup. So anyway, going off on a tangent a little bit, but I do think that has a lot to do with it. But I think there's just something to be said about, especially with folks that have been divorced. We all know that divorce is super common. It's fascinating to me how much of an emphasis we put on a relationship success being measured by whether or not it ends. Relationships ending are always signs of new beginnings. Whether or not the relationship ended on good terms or bad terms, it's still the sign of a new beginning and learnings. So this really got me thinking about some of the relationships in my past and what I took away from them. So I want to kind of chat through some things that I've learned in my past relationships. And if you guys have not listened to them yet, I would recommend going back and listening to boyfriend number 1, boyfriend number 2, fiance number 1, fiance number 2, because I'm gonna highlight some of these and what I took away from them. In those episodes, I did a lot more so of storytelling and walking through what happened in those relationships over the length of them. I really want to kind of just sit back and reflect on what I learned in those, and encourage all of you to not view your past relationships, whether they were dating relationships, engagements, or marriages. If they ended, there was obviously a reason for that. Don't feel bad about it. Don't hold on to it. We should be celebrating these things. These are new chapters, and they are signs of you having the courage and the self-awareness to walk away from something that was not serving you. And this has, nothing to do with one person being a bad person in the relationship and one person being the better person, right? I don't know the intimate details of your guys' relationships. Only you do. But at the end of the day, if something's not serving you, meaning bringing value to your life, and you're no longer growing as a human, then it's time to be done with that relationship. And not all relationships, romantic and otherwise, are meant to last forever. So learnings from my past, the first one that comes to mind, and that I think is the most important to share and talk about, is boyfriend number 1. I learned a lot from this relationship. But when I sat there and reflected on if I could just pick out one thing that was the biggest learning in that relationship for me that I took with me into future relationships, and has shaped who I am now and what my expectations are of a healthy relationship and a more mature relationship, the word independence came to mind. What I mean by that is I really learned in that relationship that in order for me to feel fulfilled and happy with myself and with my life, I needed to have an abundance of independence. So anyone that I would get involved with romantically moving forward needed to respect that and needed to embrace that and needed to be attracted to that. You know, I grew up in a pretty strict household. I had a pretty strict parental figures in my life, and there was a lot of rules and not a ton of freedom. There was restrictions on what kind of music I could listen to. I had very kind of set and strict agendas and to-dos for when I got home from school. I had a certain amount of time to be home to quote unquote relax and get a snack after school before I was able to dive into chores. Every single day after school, there was chores. So unless you had a after school sport that practice took you into the late evening, you were absolutely required to do chores every single day after school. So I would come home from the bus, have maybe 15-20 minutes to quote unquote relax, get a snack, maybe watch some TV, which to be honest with you, most of the time I was scared to do because if one of my parents walked in to see me sitting on the couch watching TV, it was an incredibly uncomfortable situation. So most of the time, just kind of nix that. I would definitely get a snack. I was always hungry because I'm definitely a snacker. That hasn't changed. But I was immediately then put into chores for the day, whatever my chores were for that week, and then homework time, and then free time. So I could only have free time to like play with the neighborhood kids, play with friends, play games, play with my siblings, like do whatever fun stuff after I got all of those things done. So required to go to church. I grew up in the church. There was a lot of rules and regulations around how I could express myself, what types of clothes I could wear. I wasn't even allowed to wear makeup until I think it was my sophomore year of high school. So lots of just kind of like restrictions and not tons of freedom and ability to express myself when I was a little bit younger. And so you know, I think naturally there's a lot of reasons that I fell into and was attracted to the person that I dated, this boyfriend number one individual, because he definitely, you know, I know now looking back, he definitely mirrored a lot of similar kind of energies and behaviors of like a strict upbringing. Like he didn't in particular reflect a specific parent of mine, but more so the not really being able to, or not being encouraged and allowed to express myself and really kind of explore the world. So that is what felt normal to me because that's what I was used to. That was my home upbringing. And so, you know, there's a lot of studies that show like that's naturally what us humans will fall into. So independence is the word that really stands out to me. My ex-boyfriend number one in that relationship was incredibly controlling. Even though I lived 2.5 hours away from where he lived because I was off at university and college for the 3 years that we dated, and he was back in Phoenix. I was in Tucson. There was constant checking up on me on the weekends, on Thursdays and Fridays and Saturdays, the, you know, typical nights to be going out. Then anytime I would go out, bet your ass I was getting checked up on. I was getting texts. I was getting calls. I can't tell you how many times I stepped outside of house parties, stepped outside of bars, to answer his calls and texts of him expressing that he was incredibly uncomfortable and knew that he claimed that he knew what guys were thinking about at that age and in that scenario and those party situations and how uncomfortable it made him feel and how he didn't know what I was up to and all these things. So I dealt with a lot of that kind of bullshit throughout that entire relationship. He had a very strong opinion on social drinking and not really being a fan of it. And he would make me feel very guilty for participating in social drinking, even when I was of like legal age. Kind of had this attitude like, you know, he was better than other people and that I shouldn't feel the desire to want to socially drink, and how like everything was about like working out and exercising and eating chicken and broccoli and rice, and that like that's all that was to life. So a lot of things like that. There was also, you know, less than a year into our relationship, he bought me a promise ring, which I talk about in that episode too. If you go back and listen to that episode, he bought me a promise ring which looked very, very much like an engagement ring. So there was definitely some signs of some feelings of being controlled and being a possession of his. So lots of examples through that. And I don't want to go too much into it. You guys can go back and listen to that episode. But that is why the word independence really, really sticks out to me for the biggest learning in that relationship. After I got out of that relationship, I told myself I would never, ever get in a relationship with someone again that did not respect my independence. Next relationship I'm going to touch on that I have a important takeaway and learning from that has stuck with me is fiance number one. A relationship with fiance number one lacked maturity and lacked an equal feeling of partnership. What I learned in that relationship is that people will show you their true colors. People really do show you from the very beginning who they truly are. Always trust and believe is my advice and my learning that I want to share on this one, that people will show you their true colors from the beginning. Friendships and romantic partners especially. We all have our own expectations of what is a healthy relationship, and only you know what your boundaries are going to be. And so my biggest takeaway from that relationship was you can't change people. You shouldn't want to change people. But I do believe that most of us want a equal feeling partnership, and we want a mature relationship, right? We want to strive towards that. And that's not to say that you can't maybe grow together in that. But if you are involved with someone or starting to explore dating someone, getting to know someone, or, have been with someone, and you feel like y'all are not on the same level, and that could be in many different ways. But if you feel like you're giving more than the other person, way more enthusiastic about the relationship, take initiation to do things and be there for the other person way more than the other person does, and that's not what you want. I don't know anyone that does. Who wants that? You need to get out of the relationship because it's not going to change. I do feel like there's opportunity to grow and communicate. And so that's why I mentioned and kind of want to go back to the point of like, we all have different expectations. So if you have made your expectations clear and communicated, what your expectations are out of a relationship and what you expect in a partnership, and you're very aware of what you're bringing to the table. And if you are not getting that back and the other person is not on your level, it's not a healthy relationship and you need to get out of it right away. I was with that person for a couple years, and, I found myself making a lot of excuses for that person because we had a lot of fun together. We had a lot of good times. We went on fun trips. We had a lot in common, live music, snowboarding trips, loved going out to eat. We loved going out to bars. We, had a lot in common in terms of like social activities. But at the end of the day, the type of partner that I wanted and expected, and how you live together, support each other, respect one another, divide up household duties, chores, those types of things, we were not from day one on the same level. And I made so many excuses and told myself so many reasons as to why every time that person would show behavior and act in certain ways that were disappointing to me. And this wasn't necessarily always because he was doing something wrong or bad. It just wasn't in line with what my expectations are of a partnership, of a healthy partnership, right? We were not on the same page. So prioritizing and learning what type of partner, what type of person is going to be on my level and will contribute just as much to the relationship and carry just as much of the weight and put as much effort and initiation of the relationship, that became a huge priority for me. And that was the biggest takeaway for me in that relationship, because life's really fun, but life's also really hard. You're going to go through shit, and you want to feel like that person's going to have your back and has their shit together. And I didn't get the kind of support that I felt I deserved and that I know I deserved, and for what I needed to like be able to thrive and put my best foot forward. So that was my biggest takeaway from that relationship. Next relationship, fiance number 2. And if you haven't listened to my fiance number 2 3-part series, You're going to want to go and listen to it, guys. It's juicy stuff. The Fiancé 3-part series has received the most downloads out of any of my episodes. So go back and listen to that. Fiancé number 2, 3-part series. And definitely need to dedicate an entire episode in the future to dissecting that relationship. There's so many things that I want to go into on the relationship. I've mentioned in past episodes that I read a book recently on narcissists and recovering from emotionally abusive relationships. And so there's a lot to dive into there. The few things that come to mind when I try to focus on the biggest learnings and takeaways from that relationship, I would say, and it's kind of hard to explain this one, but oddly enough, slowing down and enjoying the simpler, lower energy, and sometimes charismatic free parts of life that may sound bizarre to some people, but when you're in a relationship with someone who is love bombing you, pulling you in, trapping you into their world, they romance you on a level that is like you've never experienced before. So the majority of my relationship with Fiancé number 2 was incredibly high energy, constant FOMO vibes, and everything had to be on, active, and keeping up with the Joneses type of energy all the time. Everything was bigger, better than other people in his life, right? Like we had to constantly be traveling, constantly be exploring. If friends of his had recently gone to wine country or had recently traveled to Europe, we had to also go too. We had to make sure to always be showing the world, and a lot of this was being displayed through social media, how busy and how happy, quote unquote, air quotes, guys, for those of you who don't watch the YouTube video, air quote, happy and perfect our relationship was. And it was fucking exhausting. Exhausting. I cannot tell you how many times I had borderline mental breakdowns living in San Francisco with this man in the first year of our relationship, because I had just moved to a new city, never lived in a city the size of San Francisco, and there's so many wonderful things to do and explore. Right? So naturally you would think if you move to a city like San Francisco or New York or LA, whatever it may be, there's so much to do to just explore this new city you're living in. I can count on probably one hand how many weekends we actually properly spent just exploring the city that we lived in the first year that I lived there. We were constantly on the go, constantly doing things, going to shows, traveling abroad, domestically, you name it, wine country, India, Europe for Thanksgiving, trips to New York, trips to visit friends, trips to Colorado, trips up to visit my family, trips down to his parents' vacation home, trips. It was just all the time, constantly stuff going on, constantly trying to impress, constantly having to be like socially on, social activities all the time. There was rarely days that we just existed. And it was so exhausting. So I have really found in my healing time the last couple years, and especially since moving back to Oregon, because I've just found so much peace. My soul is just so at peace. I've really just found the appreciation for slowing down, not moving so fast, enjoying the simpler things in life. Not everything has to always be on all the time, and you don't have to be socially engaging to try to prove yourself to what? To whom, right? So that was one of my biggest takeaways from that. Another thing, boundary setting. I cannot tell you what an impact this man made on me being able to set healthier boundaries in my life. It has been one of the most incredible, mind-blowing experiences in the last 8 months or so. I just got to a place where I really almost had this like light bulb moment in my life where I realized that my energy and what I give off into the world and the unconditional support, the unconditional love and support, the emotional bandwidth that I give to people that I care about in my life, not everyone deserves that. Not everyone needs it. Not everyone deserves it. And I have had a lot of awakenings with that since that relationship ended. And the book that I actually just recently read talks a lot about this. You will find yourself, after going through that type of relationship, you will find yourself protecting your energy and really finding ways to weed out people in your life that are not good energy to be in your life and are not serving you and are not healthy energies for your life. So that has been absolutely one of the biggest takeaways. And it's very closely connected to my third point. Self-love, self-care, self-worth, taking care of yourself, putting yourself first, mentally, emotionally, physically, taking care of you. That has become a whole other fucking level of importance in my life since leaving that person. I really felt like I lost a lot of myself actually in that relationship, because those types of people just suck the life out of you. They take everything emotionally because they prey on people that are empathetic, that are caring, that are selfless, and will do anything for the people that they love in their life. And that's exactly the kind of person that I am. And with how things ended and what happened in that relationship, I was for a long time after that relationship a shell of myself, to be completely honest. So really prioritizing taking care of myself. And that comes out in a lot of different ways in my life. That can be going back to the boundaries things. That can be about setting boundaries, protecting me time, not overcommitting, not doing things I don't want to do. I will absolutely put myself first now, because I know I cannot show up for the people that I want to, and I cannot show up for myself if I don't prioritize that. And that was not something that I grew up and when I was younger realized that it was okay and actually healthy to do that. I always had a little bit of a sense of guilt, putting myself first and prioritizing my well-being over other people. There's always been a sense of guilt, and the word selfish in a negative connotation has been tied to that. So to wrap things up, I want to just encourage everyone to stop viewing relationships ending as failures. If you're in a relationship now that is not serving you anymore, you've done the work, you've gone to therapy, you've communicated with your partner, you both are not on the same page, you know that this relationship deep in your core is not serving you anymore and is not where you need to be in life, then it's time to let go. Also, on the note of past relationships, stop beating yourself up for relationships that you were in the past that you realize now that you shouldn't have been in. I'm still guilty of having moments of, oh, I should have known. No, you shouldn't have known. You do the best you can at the time with the information and knowledge that you have at the time. Of course, we're going to look back and see that we should have done things differently if we would have had the information we have now. So stop beating yourself up. Look at this as a journey, as a learning, and as part of your growth, and appreciate what those relationships and what those people gave to you in terms of exploring yourself, what's important to you, learning more about yourself, and just becoming a better, stronger, healthier person. And on the note of enjoying the show, the best way to help get the word out about the show is to leave reviews and ratings. So if you guys can please leave a review or a rating or both, that would be great, whatever platform you use to listen to it. I know for Apple Podcasts, if that's the platform that you guys are listening to my show on, then all you have to do is just click on the main show page, the landing page. So make sure it's not like an episode page, but the actual landing page for the show. Scroll all the way down to the bottom and you'll see a place there to leave a star rating and a review. For Spotify, super easy. It's on the very top, just below the podcast art cover album. You'll see just below that to the left, you'll see a little star rating. Just click on the star and then another box should pop up if you're on mobile, and it'll allow you to leave a rating that way. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much again for listening. And I'm also on Instagram at Kris Zervis, KrisZerv as in Victor, AS. That's my personal Instagram. Podcast show Instagram is at Third Times Me, spelt out. And I also am on TikTok as well. So follow me, add me, DM me, let me know what you think. Thanks for tuning in. See y'all next week. Thank you.